Did you know that Bill Cipher actually won in the finale of Gravity Falls? Sure, we see Dipper and Mabel take down Bill and save Gravity Falls. But is that what really happened? When Dipper went to save Mabel from her bubble, Bill said that they were going to get trapped by their greatest desires, which is why Mabel's bubble turned into Mabel Land. But Dipper finally convinced Mabel to leave, so their desire in that moment was to leave the bubble. But they never really left. Instead, the bubble just created whatever reality they wanted within the bubble. So the bubble created the illusion of going back out into reality. And that's why everything worked out so perfectly. They defeated Bill, Stan got his memory back even though that was impossible. Everything went back to normal in Gravity Falls. And Mabel even got to keep Waddles, because those were Dipper and Mabel's desires. So Mabel and Dipper are actually still stuck in that bubble living out a fantasy that they think is reality. Meanwhile, Bill now has all the time in the world to not only take over Gravity Falls, but the entire universe too. The only reason why Dipper and Mabel were able to defeat Bill is because of Waddles. That's right, the downfall of the all-powerful Bill Cipher is because of a pig. In the book of Bill, we discover that Mabel and Dipper only won in one universe, whereas in all the other timelines, Bill defeated them. And the book of Bill even has pictures of them in these universes losing. And everything in these universes seems to be the exact same, except none of these universes have Waddles as the kid's pet. This could be because Waddles only became their pet due to the kids manipulating the timeline, so they weren't actually supposed to have a pet pig. So now we know Waddles is the outlying factor here. But how did he contribute to beating Bill? Well, if we go way back in time in the book of Bill, the shaman who originally worked with Bill created the prophecy of how to defeat Bill Cipher. And one line clearly states that a pig would be involved. So Waddles just being there was enough to fulfill the prophecy of Bill's demise. Now imagine how much easier it would have been to beat him if Mabel let Waddles keep his super genius powers. Bill Cipher is one of the most powerful and evil beings in the entire multiverse. But how exactly did he come to be? Well, over 1 trillion years before the events of Gravity Falls, Bill Cipher was born. He was from a two-dimensional universe known as Euclidia, and he didn't start out evil. In fact, he was beloved by everybody so much that the mayor actually made his birthday a national holiday. But despite having it made, Bill wanted more. He called his universe a dimension of flat minds and a flat world with flat dreams, because everyone in his dimension could only see in 2D. But Bill was born with this mutation that gave him this gigantic eye that could see the third dimension. But nobody believed Bill's claims, and they even bullied him for his eye. So he finally decided to do whatever it takes so they could see the world the way he saw it. And that's how he got the Euclidean Massacre, where Bill burnt his world to the ground with everyone in it, including his own parents. Then, thanks to his 2D shape and his 3D sight, Bill was able to travel to a world in between dimensions known as the Nightmare Realm, and he used this world to fulfill his dream of living in 3D. And that's when he started communicating with people like Stanford to try to transfer over to our world, giving us the evil Bill Cipher. Loki and Bill Cipher are the same person. Or I guess I should say they're the same entity because they aren't really people. But that's right, the god of mischief and a two-dimensional triangle are the exact same. And the discovery came in one episode of none other than The Simpsons. Loki appeared and declared himself as the god of mischief, but he clarified that's just one of his many forms. And then he gestured to all of his other forms, and among them was Bill Cipher. And instead of saying buy gold like he did in Gravity Falls, he says to buy crypto, which is even more evil, frankly. And he's voiced by Alex Hirsch in this cameo, which is the creator of Gravity Falls and the original voice of Bill. Hirsch even went so far as to say that this cameo is canon to the Gravity Falls universe. So that means that Bill Cipher and Loki are the same being. That also means that Gravity Falls is in the Simpsons universe, because Bill made a cameo here. But he also made an appearance in the intro of the 750th episode of The Simpsons. So with Simpsons, Gravity Falls, and Marvel now all being under the same roof with Disney, I guess it makes sense how all three are somehow connected. Bill Cipher has a twin. Gravity Falls certainly has a lot of weird tendencies, and one of them is the focus on the relationship between twins. You have the twin siblings of Dipper and Mabel, and the twin brothers of Grunkle Stan and Stanford. But there's another character that very well may be a twin, and that's Bill Cipher. Alex Hirsch once had an AMA as the character Bill, and replied to a question stating that Bill used to have a family, but not anymore. And at the end of Weirdmageddon, Bill summoned the ancient god Axolotl, which just so happens to be the god of twins. So the only way he would have a connection with this god would be if he had a twin. And we can look at the parallels between him and another twin in the show, and that's Grunkle Stan. Stan was hell-bent in making a portal to the other universe to save his twin Stanford. And Bill is also hell-bent in trying to travel into the human world. With all the power in the universe and the ability to see all these different worlds, why is Bill obsessed with this one? Well, it could be that Bill Cipher's twin was successful in his travels to the human realm, but Bill was unable to follow, which ultimately meant that Bill lost his only family and his twin brother in this world. So like Grunkle Stan, Bill Cipher won't stop until he successfully gets into the human world, all because he wants to find his twin. Bill Cipher is still alive. At the end of Gravity Falls, it seems like the kids and their grunkles defeated Bill. They trapped him inside Stan's mind and erased him along with Stan's memories. So Stan sacrificed his memories in order to save the world from Bill. However, after the plan succeeded, Grunkle Stan was actually able to remember things. He remembered Waddles, and then the kids, and then just about everything else started to come back to him, which is great news for Mabel and Dipper and everybody else who loved him. But once Stan remembers more and more, he'll eventually remember Bill too, which will make Bill exist once again inside Stan's brain. Now the positive here is that he can only exist inside the mindscape and the nightmare realm, but if Bill can trick someone into giving him their body, we may see another Doomsday in Gravity Falls once again. Now hopefully Ford was smart enough to install one of those metal plates inside Stan's brain. That way Bill can never escape. But that means Stan will have to suffer Bill's existence all on his own. The entire plot of Gravity Falls never happened. Gravity Falls is all about these supernatural things that happen in this seemingly normal small town. But in reality, it really is just a normal small town. There's absolutely nothing supernatural about it. Instead, everything we saw in that show was made up by Grunkle Stan. Stan, as the owner of the Mystery Shack, is the biggest scam artist out there. But clearly based on the shape of his house, business hasn't been doing well lately. People stopped believing that any of the mysterious items were real. So he decided to create a fake docu-series on the town of Gravity Falls. And the entirety of it would be based on his family and the Mystery Shack, with the goal of making Gravity Falls seem like this mythical place with all these supernatural mysteries. That way, tourists would stop by to see it with their own eyes, and Stan can make a profit off of all these tourists. After all, there were some pretty insane things that happened in Gravity Falls, like reality as we know it being turned upside down. So for absolutely none of that to even leak out into the real world is a bit suspicious. In fact, it's intentional, because Grunkle Stan will go to any length to pull off a scam, even if he has to create, produce, and star in his own TV show known as Gravity Falls. How was Grunkle Stan able to see through Lil Gideon's act in Gravity Falls? As we know, Stan is the ultimate scam artist, so naturally his rival is another scam artist, and that's Lil Gideon. Lil Gideon amazes people with his cuteness, but the selling point of his act is that he's actually psychic, and everyone in Gravity Falls falls for it completely. And while Lil Gideon can conjure up some magic thanks to owning one of the journals, he has no psychic powers of his own. But the folks of Gravity Falls don't know that, except for one. Grunkle Stan was able to detect that Lil Gideon was faking it from the beginning. Now initially you'd think that's just Stan's natural skepticism, or the fact that one scam artist can sniff out the other. But later on in the show, we discover that Stan actually has a brother, and even though Stan's been going by Stanford, his brother is actually the one that's named Stanford, while his name is Stan Lee. So the fact that Lil Gideon would always call Grunkle Stan Stanford was a telltale sign that he wasn't psychic. Otherwise, he would know Stan's real name. Instead, he's just little old normal Gideon. How was Grunkle Stan able to regain all of his memories at the end of Gravity Falls? As we know, Ford erases Stan's mind with a memory gun from the Blind Eye Society, and he did this to erase Bill within Stan's mind. But because of this, Stan loses all of his memories. Yet for some reason that can't be explained, Stan was able to start recalling all of his memories and eventually got his mind right. Now how is that possible when the memory gun is supposed to be absolute? Well, when Ford pointed the memory gun at Stan, he wrote Stanley Pines on it, which means Stan would lose all of his memories as Stanley Pines. But because Stan has gone through so many identities in his crime-ridden life, like Stanford or Grunkle Stan or even just Stan, he has very little memories as just Stanley Pines, which is why when Bill visits him inside his mind, there's hardly any memories. And that's why Stan was able to remember Waddles right away, because he only only knew the pig under the identity of Grunkle Stan. Same with the kids and all of Gravity Falls. So Stan might have lost his memory as Stanley, which were memories from when he was a kid, and those memories were fading away anyway. But he'll never forget being Grunkle Stan. Stanley Pines is not the twin brother of Stanford Pines. When Ford is introduced, we find out that he's the long-lost twin of Grunkle Stan, but that may not be the case. There's a theory that Stanley is really an evil version of Ford from a parallel universe. When they explain what happened with the portal, they claim that Stan accidentally destroyed it when Ford went through it. But really, when Ford created the portal and McGucket abandoned him because of what he saw, he went in on his own and discovered a parallel universe where everyone is evil, and he was able to track down the five-fingered version of himself, who then tricked Ford and used the portal to go back into his world. Ford then had to destroy the portal from the other side to ensure that no other evil versions would get in. This would explain why Grunkle Stan is an all-around terrible person, and why he was so intent on rebuilding that portal, because he wanted to go back home. But he grew to love Gravity Falls and Mabel and Dipper, and he felt bad that they couldn't be with their real uncle. So he brought him back, and Ford quickly wanted the portal destroyed after what he saw in there, and crafted a story with his evil version to explain why there are two of them. After all, we see no physical proof of them from the past other than flashbacks, which they easily could have made up. And thankfully, Grunkle Stan was able to reform, sort of, but it's probably for the best that we keep that portal closed so no other evil versions can get it. Did you know that Grunkle Stan has an ex-wife from a different show? In a special character commentary DVD set, Stan elaborates on his previous marriage. He says he was married to a woman named Marilyn for less than a day in Vegas, but it turns out she just married Stan to steal his money, and everything about her turned out to be fake, including her hair and her name. Now that seems like a throwaway line in the Gravity Falls universe, but it starts to make a lot more sense when we look at the Owl House. In the Owl House, there's a character known as Ida Clawthorne, and she has a portal to the human world, and she'd use that portal to steal riches from humans and bring them back to her world. So it would make sense for her to be the one that conned Stan out of his money. But the similarities don't end there. Stan described Marilyn as having pale skin and one sharp tooth, just like Ida. And of course, she had a shirt on that read over 30 and flirty, just like Ida's coffee mug in the Owl House. And the piece of evidence that solidifies this theory is in the season 2 finale. It's revealed that Ida goes by a different name in the human realm. And what's that name? Marilyn. So that means that Stan from Gravity Falls married Ida from the Owl House. What is the real name of Dipper Pines from Gravity Falls? Many residents of Gravity Falls have secret identities. We discovered that the author of the journal was actually Stanford Pines. And we discovered that Stanford Pines is actually Stanley Pines. But what we never got an answer to is what Dipper's name really is. In one episode, we see Dipper's hat fall off, revealing his forehead. And we see that Dipper has a birthmark that looks exactly like the Big Dipper. Hence how Dipper got the nickname Dipper, but he never says his actual name throughout the entire series. We can assume it's similar to Mabel's, as the other twins in the family, Stanford and Stan Lee, have very similar names. Plus, the creator even hinted that their names are similar. But we finally got definitive evidence of what Dipper's name really is, and it can be found in the 3rd journal. Ford was writing about an interaction he had with Dipper where Dipper blurted out, "Mason, my real name is Mason." Everyone just started calling him Dipper, and he felt it was too late to correct them. But the real stars of Gravity Falls aren't Dipper and Mabel, it's Mason and Mabel. Mabel from Gravity Falls has telekinetic powers. Well, she was at least supposed to have telekinetic powers. In the original pilot of Gravity Falls, Dipper references a time where Mabel uses telekinesis, which means that she just had the power of telekinesis within her. Or she happened to find the amulet that Gideon owned in the original series, the same amulet that helped him use telekinesis. This new addition to Mabel's character actually would have added a lot to the story, because it would have made even more sense why Gideon was trying to make Mabel his girlfriend. He'd obviously want Mabel's telekinetic powers for his shows to scam people, or he'd want to manipulate Mabel into giving him the magical amulet, so that he can have the power of true telekinesis. Then use that to ultimately scam more people, take down the Pines family, and rule rule Gravity Falls. And honestly, this would have been a much better plot point than just the basic reveal of Gideon already having the amulet. So I wonder why it was taken out from the pilot, because we need to see Mabel in action with her telekinetic powers. Do you know the real reason why Wendy works at the Mystery Shack in Gravity Falls? When you think about it, Wendy should have been fired a long time ago. She slacks on the job, always leaves early, and never does what her boss Grunkle Stan says. And yet Stan never fires her, which is shocking considering how cheap he is. Stan would never waste money on an employee that he doesn't need, but he keeps her around anyway, and that's because he owes Wendy's family. When we're introduced to Stan's brother Ford, we see a flashback of the Mystery Shack being built, and we can see a young lumberjack with the same exact hat that Wendy wears. So that has to be Wendy's dad, Manly Dan Corduroy, who after building that house and having Wendy, passed his hat down to her. And it's confirmed in the journal where Ford writes that his house was built by the then boyish Dan Corduroy. So as a thank you to the Corduroy family for providing him the Mystery Shack, Stan lets Wendy work for him during the summer, even if she is the worst employee in the world. Plus, I'm sure he gets a kick out of Dipper embarrassing himself in front of her every day. Wendy from Gravity Falls wasn't always cool. As we know, Wendy is the laid-back, chill, cold-as-ice employee at the Mystery Shack, and she can fend for herself, fight, and even be barbaric at points, all thanks to her upbringing as a lumberjack. But originally, Wendy was supposed to be a completely different character. She was gonna be your stereotypical vegan hippie, and she would even try to sell weird-tasting juice out of the back of her van to Mabel and Dipper, almost implying that she's the children's show version of a dealer. What stayed the same, though, was that she was a part of the lumberjack Corduroy family, but because of her eco-friendly ways, she much preferred hugging trees rather than cutting them down, which would cause a rift between her and her family, and would be the reason why she finds friends in the gang at the Mystery Shack. And her appearance was even different. In the original pilot, she actually had brown hair rather than red, along with a beanie instead of her iconic hat. Thankfully, they did the right thing and changed Wendy entirely for the series, for both the fact that it would make the show better, and the fact that kids probably shouldn't be watching a teen deal juice. Who is the father of Soos from Gravity Falls? In one episode, we discover that Soos hates his birthday, and it's because of the trauma he has from his dad never showing up to his birthday parties. And in the finale, we find out that Soos doesn't even remember what his dad looks like because it's been so long since he's seen him. So who is this mysterious father? Well, one theory suggests that it's none other than Ford, the twin brother of Stanley Pines. After all, Ford disappeared in the portal around the same time that Soos's dad disappeared from his life, and Abuelita could have faked those cards that were sent from his dad in order to cheer Soos up on his birthday. It would also make sense why Soos has a passion for mystery, and why Soos feels a connection with Ford's twin brother Stanley as a father figure. And Soos may not have recognized Ford when he came back because, like he said, he has no memory of what he looks like. Now, this theory sounds legit on the surface, but I don't buy it, because Ford would have recognized his own son when he came back, and I'm sure Abuelita would have recognized Ford too, or at least would have mistaken Stanley for Ford when she saw him. So in reality, I think Soos's dad is just some dirtbag who abandoned him, but luckily he found his true family at the Mystery Shack and his true father in Stanley Pines. Robbie from Gravity Falls is really a zombie. Gravity Falls is filled with supernatural things, but one of them was hiding in plain sight. Wendy's ex-boyfriend and Dipper's rival Robbie is a zombie. In the first episode, the journal reads that zombies are known for their pale skin, bad attitudes, and are mistaken for teenagers. And what teenager has the palest skin and worst attitude? Robbie. And there are various other hints throughout the series, like the name of his band, Robbie and the Tombstones, the fact that he was hanging out in a gravesite all alone, and the fact that his parents are morticians. And not only are they morticians, but in the finale, we see that they have no problem handling zombies. So it could be that they lost Robbie at a young age, and then brought him back from the dead as a zombie, which would explain the drastic change in his pictures within the house. Plus, his iconic sweatshirt is a heart with stitches on it, indicating that he was fixed up and brought back to life, officially making Robbie Valentino a zombie. Or I guess now you can call him Rob Zombie. Pacifica Northwest from Gravity Falls is the product of an affair. Now, her parents would lead you to believe that she's from the prestigious Northwest family, the most rich and famous family in all of Gravity Falls. All based on a lie, by the way. But when you take a look at her parents, they're both brunettes while she's blonde. Now, that doesn't really prove anything considering the fact that Dipper and Mabel have pointed out that she's a fake blonde that dyes her hair, but Bill Cipher pointed out this same thing, and he added that Pacifica needs to get a paternity test, suggesting that Preston is not her real father, which would make sense considering how cold and distant he acts towards her, and how Pacifica can actually be kind unlike her family. But because he is so obsessed with maintaining the reputation of his family, he keeps the affair a secret. Now, who the father really is tricky, but given Preston's disdain for hillbillies and lumberjacks, it very well could be one of them. In fact, her real dad being a lumberjack very well may be the reason why she felt bad about treating the lumberjacks the way her family did. And it could be the reason why the lumberjack spears protect Pacifica after she breaks the curse, because Pacifica Northwest's true dad is a lumberjack. Gravity Falls and Rick and Morty are set in the same universe, or I guess I should say the same multiverse, despite the shows being on two completely separate networks. There's been some crossover between the two thanks to multi-dimensional travel. In the episode Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, Bill Cipher can actually be seen on one of the monitors, and he can be seen again while Rick is being arrested by the Galactic Federation. He's seen on the screen being studied by the Federation, obviously due to the insane amount of interdimensional crimes he's committed. And Bill once again appears in Rick and Morty, but this time it's just his name. When Rick reveals to Morty that he stores his memories, you can see two tubes labeled Bill C and Stanford, obviously for Bill Cipher and Stanford Pines. Rick and Morty must have ran into them at some point, and something so bad had to have happened that Rick had to erase that memory from Morty's mind. Perhaps Rick and Morty stole the memory gun created by McGucket for the Blind Eye Society, and that's how Rick was able to create this technology. And then he erased Morty's mind of Stanford and Bill so he wouldn't feel guilty. But either way, Rick and Morty and Gravity Falls are clearly connected. Gravity Falls exists in a frog universe. In the show Amphibia, there's proof that Gravity Falls has crossed over directly, and there's also parallel versions of the characters, making Amphibia a parallel universe of Gravity Falls. At one point, the characters stumble across the Curiosity Hut, their universe's version of the Mystery Shack, and there we can find the owner Curator Pawns, their universe's version of Stan Pines, and they even have their own version of Soos working there, and his name is literally just Frog Soos, and Alex Hirsch voices both of these frog characters, just as he voiced the original Gravity Falls versions, proving that this is a parallel universe of Gravity Falls. And we also have some direct references to Gravity Falls, all thanks to the interdimensional travel of Bill Cipher. He can be found on a post-it in Amphibia, he can also be seen in a book during the finale, and he makes another appearance on the carpet in the museum, clearly leaving his mark as a powerful being in that universe too. But ultimately, it provides concrete evidence that Gravity Falls and Amphibia are connected. Am I a part of the Gravity Falls universe? Gravity Falls has seen numerous crossovers with other shows and series, like with Rick and Morty and The Simpsons and Amphibia and Owl House, along with many others. But the fact that a YouTuber like myself could be connected to Gravity Falls is a shock, but it may just be reality. As you know, there's a character named Lazy Susan, and she gets that name from her lazy eye. In one episode, she gets captured by the Blind Eye Society, where they erase her memory of the gnomes she saw. And in that episode, her full name is revealed, and it is none other than Susan Wentworth. And what's my last name? Wentworth. So Lazy Susan could be a long-lost Wentworth bro. Perhaps she's my great aunt, or Graunt in this case, and she doesn't even remember because the Blind Eye Society has wiped away so much of her memory. But the reality is that Lazy Susan and myself could be a part of the same family tree, making me, Randy Wentworth, a part of the Gravity Falls universe.